Hi everybody, just wanted to give you one little video demonstration of how to apply some of what you're going to learn in this unit. So we're looking at the Schenkerian theory handouts, and what I'm going to do is just take you through the very first of these abstract examples. So this is the one on the second handout, and then I'm going to show you how I kind of get from this to my result, which you'll also find in your handouts right here. Just show you the basic process that I would usually go through. Now, going back to the original one, really, even before you get to this, let's assume that this is sort of a outer voice reduction like you did in Module 2. And you took a real musical example, you reduced it down to its bass and soprano framework, and maybe this is something like you got here. It's like a simple thing to start off with. Now we're going to need to take all of this knowledge and bring it together in this example. One thing I would first think about is, in the last module we learned about the phrase model. If I'm looking at this example right here, the first measure looks all like a tonic prolongation to me. Then we have predominant, dominant, and tonic. You'll definitely want to think about that before you even start to do any Schenkerian notation, because your Schenkerian notation needs to reflect this sort of analysis. Is trying to get one level a little bit deeper and look at some deeper linear aspects. So first step, as I mentioned in the handout, is figure out where your notes are going to be from the main ersatz example. So keep in mind from the handout, these are the notes you're going to use for the half notes. So right here, you're going to use the half note symbols. These are the most structurally important pitches that you're going to have here. And basically it'll always look like one of these two things. It's either going to be the bass always goes 1 5 1, and the soprano either goes mi re do or sol fa mi re do. So that really, as far as the bass, is sort of always going to be like this. Upper voice could be one of these two options. You'll have to kind of scan through the music, see which one makes a little more sense to you. So with this in mind again, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to figure out where I'm going to get these notes from my original example. And strongly recommend that you start by looking at the bass. I need to find where my 1 5 1 is here and use the cadence as your model. In this case, I see that I'm going to get the whole note, the half note value here on the 1. I'm going to get the 5 here, and I'm going to get the 1 here. It is usually the very first bass note, root position 1, that gets the half note value. And it's usually the cadential 5 happening at the ending that gets the 5. Now, if you had a half cadence, by the way, you would use right here, if we hadn't gone on to the 1, you'd use that interruption symbol, which you'll find on some of the examples. So now when I go over here, take a look at my solution. Just look at the bass line. You'll see that I have the half note here for there, 1 5 1, and I put a line connecting all those notes. Start by getting this down there, get your framework to begin with. All right, so start with the bass because that's usually the easiest thing to get. It's pretty straightforward. It's usually the beginning, and it's usually the cadential moment where you get those notes. Now, next up, more difficult is going to be figuring out whether it's a 3 line. Now I'm looking at the upper line, a 3 line or a 5 line. So you have to just kind of scan through the music and see what you can trace out. Every single note in that descent needs to be harmonized. Now here, there's no scale degree 5 whatsoever, so we have no chance of a 5 line. But I can kind of see how I trace mi, re, do. I'm noticing, now of course I gotta make sure all those notes do get harmonic support. Yes, scale degree 3 does get harmonic support from 1. Scale degree 2 gets harmonic support over the 2 chord. And then scale degree 1 at the ending. Now, another factor here is that scale degree 2 actually gets support over the 2 chord. And then we get this leap down. Now remember, Schenker is always going to have scale degree 2 harmonized by the 5 chord. All right, so ultimately he's going to show this, or Schenkerian analysis would show this scale degree 2 as being harmonized by the 5 chord. What that means is that in our reduction over here, what I'm going to do, so notice how I did the half note for the scale degree 3 for that whole first measure, and also we'll talk about a little later, this kind of dotted slur means retaining the same pitch. But I show scale degree 2 getting activated over the 2/6 chord, but ultimately belonging to the 5 chord. That's what this line means. It shows kind of the displacement of that note to the 5 chord. And therefore, it shows this, anytime you have a note in parentheses, it shows it's sort of implied there. And then we have this skip down to scale degree 7. All right, now that you have this, the rest of it becomes pretty straightforward. All the rest of the notes are going to be analyzed in some ways as embellishments of this. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to reference this page of your handout, the ones that says what type of symbol to show for some of these different aspects. One that I'll point you to immediately is the use of flags. Flags will be a harmonized neighbor note figure, but we can also put this in a bass line. Over here on my Schenkerian analysis, I've put a flag on the 2/6 chord because it creates this neighbor note embellishment of 5. So actually this is kind of one of those standard things you'll find in many of these graphs. You'll see I have it in all my other ones as well. When you go from the predominant to the dominant, that's such a, let me see, this one too. Such a standard bass line. Arriving on the 5 chord is the fa to sol bass, and you can use that little flag there. But we can also use the flag melodically. Anyway, so yeah, going back to this is what you're going to use. Various slurs, parentheses, broken slurs to show things. Over here, on my original musical example, scale degree, so E was scale degree 3. We see that there's a passing tone figure right here. Ultimately, we're going from mi to do, we're prolonging the tonic. So what I do over here is I do a slur from mi to do, showing that it's a consonant interval that's spanned. And then the D is such a surface level thing. I just do a closed note help with no stem on it whatsoever. It shows that it's a very, very surface passing tone. And same thing here. Now in the bass for this measure, we kind of get the reverse. We get a voice exchange here, notice, right? That's happening. So same idea. Consonant skip from C to E, then a passing tone. So a lot of times this the slur is used to show a consonant span, interval span, and then the note that doesn't have anything on it whatsoever is usually got a passing tone essentially. Yeah, same thing right here. Since this is a consonant skip, it gets a slur figure. And that's it for the first analysis here. I'll let you spend time on your own on the handout looking at my other reductions. But you'll see there are some spots where I use neighbor note figures. So if you get just a surface embellishing neighbor note like here and here, I can use the flag symbol. Just in each case, it kind of shows you how you can interpret a Schenkerian analysis. Let's see, do I have, yeah, right here, don't forget also, if you end with a half cadence over re, this interruption symbol is used. But I think if you look at all the rest of this, even if you didn't have the music, you can kind of tell what I'm showing here. I'm showing a consonant leap right here. The dotted slur shows the retained pitch. Dotted slurs are used for that, just like they're used over here, dotted slur, so that's a retained pitch. Sometimes if I get like a slur, yeah, right here I showed the voice exchange, same kind of idea that we saw in the last example. If I wanted to, by the way, I could have also put a flag on this neighbor note if I wanted to, but really this gets the idea across. There's a lot of, you can be pretty loose. I mean, in all honesty, if you look at actual Schenker analyses, there's not a lot of consistency. There are some things that are consistent, but there's a lot of flexibility. Here I'm showing that G is basically, this is basically a prolongation of the tonic, so I'm just kind of showing G as a consonant skip. and then the B is itself kind of subservient to it, and so on. Now, when you get to the actual musical examples, for the homework, and when you're looking through some of these, like I said, you're going to essentially start by doing a harmonic analysis, do a little reduction. In fact, maybe I'll show you one of my analyses of one of these. But I do want you to try these out on your own. We can discuss some of these in our meeting on Thursday if you want to look at some of your practice ones before you try the homework. And definitely do try those out. But like this one right here, you'll see that essentially this is 1, 5, 6, 5 to 1. Let's just look at that little bit here. I first want to reduce this down a little bit, just like you did in your last assignment. So essentially 1, 5, 6, 1, bass goes do, ti, do. Soprano, I would do me, fa, me. That seems to be the main counterpoint for that. Let me zoom in a little bit. So do, ti, do against me, fa, me. Now let's take a look at what I did in my analysis, which is right here. Let's look at this spot right here. So you'll notice at the deepest level of my bass, we didn't look at the whole thing, but this is sort of what it looks like. In fact, let me get the whole screen in here if you need to pause on this while you're working through these and check some of them later, because I didn't include all of these in the handouts. But anyhow, you'll see how you can just take these same ideas and apply it to real music. You just have to reduce it first, and then it's essentially the exact same process we just talked about. So do, ti, do, that's a neighbor note figure prolonging the tonic. So we know that the 5, 6, 5 chord's a neighbor chord. I gave it a flag to show that it's, I should probably do this, by the way. Yeah, something to show that connects to that. Same thing in the soprano, me, fa, me. Fa is a neighbor note to me, so I can see that that's going on there. I use the dotted slur to show the retained pitch, and so on and so forth. I'll let you look through this on your own, but you'll figure out the logic of what I did for all these examples right here. Anyhow, I hope this was helpful, and do work through these handouts very, very carefully. Don't rush into the homework.